Good evening, and welcome to The Quiet. You're listening to Mr. GhostWhisper. Tonight, we step away from the light. We're leaving the well-trodden paths behind and venturing into the deep freeze, into Canada's most isolated places, where the snow doesn't just cover the ground, it covers secrets. For the next hour, I'm going to share with you 10 documented events, 10 things that defy logic. Each one is rooted in police reports, in witness statements, in evidence that just refuse to be explained away. These aren't campfire tales. These are real incidents. Vanished people who left only impossible clues behind. Crimes with no perpetrator. Echoes of voices that shouldn't exist. Discoveries so chilling, they forced case files to be reopened decades later. If you're new to these corners, consider subscribing to Mr. GhostWhisper. We tread where the stories are still breathing. Hit that notification bell, so you're here when the next whisper rises from the silence. Now, turn down the lights, lock your doors, and follow me into the frozen, forgotten corners of this land, where the cold isn't the only thing that gets under your skin. You know how sometimes one tiny detail just sticks with you? For me, it was the coffee that morning. Tasted like burnt tires. Last normal thing I remember before everything just went sideways. My name's Leo. Back then, I was a field tech for an environmental outfit. Got stuck on a 6-week rotation in this patch of old-growth forest in central Newfoundland. Middle of nowhere. They needed a grid reference just to find the dirt road in. My job was monitoring soil and water samples ahead of a proposed logging cut. Solitary, muddy work. I loved it. My partner at the main trailer was a guy named Sam, big bear of a man from Corner Brook who snored like a chainsaw. That last morning, a Tuesday in late October. Frost so hard it glittered like crushed glass. I was up before dawn, shook Sam's bunk frame. Headed to the north grid, back by supper. He just grunted into his pillow. Watch for the bog holes, buddy. She's soft after that rain. Always do, I said. And I meant it. I was careful. I'd been doing this for years. Ever since I flunked out of university and found I was only good for 2 things, walking and observing. I geared up. Steel-toe pack boots, my ripped orange Hy-Vees vest, backpack with sample kits, and a sad peanut butter sandwich. Filled my thermos with that awful coffee, and stepped out. The cold bit my cheeks. Clean. Sharp. Pick up the pace slightly here, moving into the routine. The trek to the north grid was a straight shot. 2 clicks along a disused skidder trail, then a half-click bushwhack to my stations. First kilometer was routine. Sky lightened to a dull gray. Saw some fresh moose scat, a flutter of gray jays. I was thinking about the data, the pH levels dropping, when I saw them. Other tracks came out of the west woods, cutting across my path at a sharp angle. Boot prints, good-sized, maybe 11s. Zigzag tread I didn't recognize. They fell in ahead of me, heading north. My first thought was just annoyance. Some hunter or a company scout messing up my transect lines. I radioed base. Tinny voice crackles through. Base, this is Leo on the North Trail. I've got fresh boot prints on my route. Anyone else scheduled out here? Negative, Leo. You're the only one cleared for the North Sector today. A little prickle went up my neck. Copy. Keep the channel open, yeah? Roger that. Check in on the hour. I sped up. Wanted to see who was up ahead. Tracks were fresh, edges still crisp in the frost. They walked a normal pace, steady rhythm. I followed them for another 20 minutes. Forest got thicker. Only sound was my breath and the crunch underfoot. Then, I stopped dead. Pause. Let the silence hang. Then, slower. Confused. The tracks ended. Not at a tree, not at a rock, not at the edge of the creek, which was frozen solid. One boot print was planted firm, toe pointing north, and then nothing. No next step. No disturbance in the pine needles and frost beyond it. No scuff, no drag. It was like the person was standing there 1 second and just dissolved into the air. My heart started this slow, heavy thump. I got on the radio. "Base, I've got a situation." Static. Then, "Go ahead, Leo." These tracks, they just stop. In the middle of nowhere. I mean, they end. There's no one here. A pause. Too long. "Confirm your location. Are you at the north grid?" "No, I'm about 800 meters south. This isn't right." My own voice sounded thin, like a stranger's. Become more methodical, trying to cling to procedure. I forced myself to be calm, methodical, circled the last print, got down on my haunches. It was deep, a man's weight. I looked up, scanned the trees. Nothing. Looked down again. That's when I saw it. The first real wrong thing. In the very center of the heel impression, the pine needles weren't just flattened, they were bleached, a tiny perfect circle of gray-white, like they'd been seared by a cold acid. I fumbled for my camera, my hands were shaking, took pictures. As I stood up, a movement in my left peripheral vision, deep in the timber. Sharper, tense. I snapped my head toward it. A figure, standing maybe 40 yards off, half hidden by a stand of young fir. Tall, dark pants, unzipped coat, and underneath, a flash of orange high-vis. My breath caught. "Hey!" I shouted. My voice just got swallowed by the trees. "Hey, you lost!" The figure didn't move, just stood there, facing me. Shadows hid its features, but that high-vis, that garish orange, same as mine, a slash of wrong color in the gloom. "I'm with the survey crew," I called, taking a step off the trail. "You need help?" It moved. It didn't turn, didn't adjust its stance. It just began to walk backward, smoothly, silently. It retreated between the trees, its front still perfectly facing me, its legs moving in this impossible, gliding reverse gait. No stumble, never looked behind. It just receded. A cold that had nothing to do with October locked my spine. Every instinct screamed, "Run." But a deeper, stupider part, the part that needs to know. It pushed me forward. I crashed into the woods. "Stop, just stop." I reached the spot. Nothing, no sign. I looked down, panting, searching for its tracks. The forest floor was a uniform blanket. No footprints, not mine, not its. It was like I'd floated there. Panic, pure and electric. I turned and ran. A blind, crashing sprint back to the trail. Didn't stop till I hit the first marker for my north grid, clinging to that plastic ribbon like a life preserver. I radioed, gasping. "Base! I saw him! I'm out here!" All I got was frantic, chopped static. Sounded like voices arguing underwater. And then, my equipment. The pH meter readout was scrolling gibberish. GPS battery was full, but the screen showed a swirling gray fractal pattern. My watch had stopped. My tools, my links to the rational world, were glitching. The rest of the day is a blur. A slow-motion escape. I followed my own tracks back, terrified they'd vanish too. They hadn't. When I stumbled into camp, Sam took one look at me and called the foreman. RCMP came. I told the story again and again. They brought a forensics guy. He confirmed the prints were fresh, unknown, and that they just terminated. Had no explanation for the bleached needles. Searched for a missing hunter. Found nothing. My camera's memory card, corrupted. Just gray streaks. They grounded me. Sam started sleeping with the lights on. The company quietly closed the north grid. Cited unstable terrain. Later, I heard a local trapper, an older Mi'kmaq man named Joseph, asked the foreman about the white ring in the footprint. When they told him, he just nodded. Grim said, "That's not a trail, that's a door, and something there doesn't like it being followed." Refused to say more. I left when my rotation was up. Never went back to fieldwork. I'm in a St. John's office now, drafting reports. The only wilderness is the view of Signal Hill from my window. But sometimes, on foggy evenings, when the streetlights glow orange in the mist, I'll see a figure, standing at the end of the block, motionless, and a sick, electric dread tells me, if I walk toward it, it won't turn and run. It'll just glide backward, drawing me after it, into a place where the trails don't lead anywhere, and the only thing waiting is an end, with nothing on the other side. You ever have a job that fits your life a little too perfectly? For me, that was the night shift. I used to be the radio operator for the Department of Fisheries out of Tofino, on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Name's Arlo. My world was a little shack on the government dock. All glowing dials, the smell of old electronics, and the sound of static. Weather reports, and the occasional crackled mayday from some trawler 20 miles out in the heaving black. After my marriage to Dana ended, quietly, just paperwork, that solitude felt like a cocoon. The night it happened was late February. The rain wasn't even falling, just hanging in the air. A cold, dense fog that swallowed the dock lights whole. My colleague, Hank, big guy, carved driftwood whales for fun. He'd clocked out at 11. Said his usual, "Don't let the ghosts bite, Arlo." I'd just poured my third coffee when the VHF set to the emergency channel. Crackled to life. But it wasn't protocol. No mayday. Just a voice. A woman's voice, strained thin with fear, but eerily clear. "Hello? Can anyone hear me?" I keyed the mic. "This is Fisheries Station Tofino. You're on Channel 16, the emergency frequency. Identify yourself and state your nature." A pause, filled with a hiss that wasn't quite static. "My name is Ilara Voss. I'm at the old lightkeeper's cottage, south of Chesterman Beach. There's someone in the boathouse." I knew the place. A decommissioned station, all granite and stubbornness. No road in. "Ilara, are you on a boat? What's your VHF source?" "It's the old set, in the kitchen. It shouldn't work. The batteries are from my flashlight. I needed a voice." Her breath hitched. The scratching stopped. I can hear him on the stairs now, the ones from the boathouse cellar up to the main floor. A cold knot tightened in my gut. This had to be a prank. But her terror, it was a live wire in the air. "Ilara, listen, get out. Go out the front door and up the path, right now." "I can't." A whisper now. The staircase from the cellar comes up in the hallway. He'd see me. I'm in the bedroom. The door's locked. "Window. Use the window." "I'm trying. I'm at the window." Rustling sounds. The scrape of wood on wood. Then a gasp. "He's at the bedroom door. Arlo? He's just standing there. I can see his boots under the gap. Rubber boots. Fisherman's boots." My own name. I hadn't given it. The clock read 12:18 a.m. How do you know my name?" She didn't answer. The sound that came next, it was a low, wet tearing, like canvas being slowly ripped, not wood splintering. Something softer. Ilara let out a choked whimper. "He's not. The door is still locked. He's coming through it. The wood is just parting." "Ilara, run! Smash the window!" A final, sharp cry, cut off, not by silence, by a surge of noise. A roaring, white-capped wave of sound that wasn't the sea. It was a chorus of whispers, layered and discordant, speaking words just below comprehension. Then, dead air. I called the RCMP, gave them the coordinates, sat there with my hands shaking, staring at the silent radio. It was impossible. That old set couldn't have the range. The power, it wasn't feasible. The two Mounties who showed up had that grim, polite skepticism. I played the tape I'd recorded. In the fluorescent light of the office, her voice sounded even more horrifyingly real. The sergeant, Miller, rubbed his temples. "We'll check the cottage, Mr. Jenkins, but you should know, an Ilara Voss hasn't been the lightkeeper there for over 30 years. She disappeared, presumed drowned in a storm, 1968. They wouldn't let me go. I spent the dawn wired on bad coffee, listening to the normal, sane traffic of the morning fleet. At 7:15 a.m., Miller returned. His face was pale, his professional calm cracked. "We found her," he said, flat. "Is she?" "She's been deceased for decades, sir. Remains in the root cellar of the boathouse." He wouldn't meet my eye. "The cottage was sealed. The bedroom door you described, intact, locked from the inside with a rusted bolt. No one had been in that room in years. But the tape, the radio in the kitchen," he said slowly, "was a museum piece, no power source. The back panel was fused shut with corrosion." He took a deep breath. "And Mr. Jenkins, we found something else, carved into the door of the root cellar, from the inside, recent, based on the wood." He showed me a photo on his phone. 2 words, gouged deep. "Heard you." The official report called it a historical discovery. My tape? Unexplained interference. A freak atmospheric bounce. Case closed. I quit my job not long after. Couldn't stand the static. But here's what I never told them. The thing that haunts me more. Before I left, I tracked down an old mariner in a Ucluelet pub, mentioned the Voss disappearance. His roomy eyes narrowed. "Ah," he said, sipping his dark rum. "The listeners. Old story. Some say when the fog gets throaty like that, it ain't just water, it's a window. And things on the other side, they get lonely, they mimic, they use old lines, old voices, to try and find a way through." He looked at me. "Makes a kind of awful sense, don't it? A lighthouse ain't just for light, it's a signal, and something might want to answer. So that's my ending. It's not a neat death, it's a life sentence. I live in a city now, far from any coast. But sometimes, when the rain is just right, I'll hear a burble of static from a turned-off radio, or I'll catch a whisper under the wind that sounds like my own name, spoken in a voice that's trying too hard to be human. I don't answer anymore. I just listen, heart hammering, waiting to hear if the door, my door, starts to softly tear. My name is Simone. I'm a historical restorer. My world used to be lathe and plaster, heart pine floorboards, the careful chemistry of stripping century-old varnish. That was before last fall. I took a job in Elliston, a scattered outport community in Newfoundland that's more wind and rock than town. The project was the old Larkin schoolhouse, built 1910, shut down in 72, just a skeleton of peeling clapboard by the time I got there. I brought my dog, Bear, a stoic Newfoundland mix, and rented a saltbox house with a view of the endless gray Atlantic. The work was slow, satisfying. I'd been at it about 3 weeks, pulling up warped floorboards to check the joists. My local help was a man in his 60s named Cyril, hands like gnarled rope. He'd talk about the old times between swings of his hammer. "My aunt taught here," he said one afternoon. "Said it was a lonely place. Fog had come in so thick you couldn't see the water. Kids'd say they heard other kids whispering in it." It was Friday, October 27th. Cyril had left early. I was cleaning up alone, sweeping near the teacher's dais. My broom handle struck the base of the raised platform, and it let out a hollow thunk. Not solid. I knelt down, ran my fingers along the wood. One panel, painted to match the rest, had a hairline crack outlining a small square door, maybe 2 feet tall, a hidden cubby. My heart did that silly restorer's jump, the thrill of a time capsule. Maybe some slate pencils, a 1920s coin. I used my utility knife to work the seam. The little door swung inward on stiff hinges, and a breath of air came out, dust dry, with a faint sweet smell I couldn't place, old wool and dried lavender. I pointed my headlamp inside. It wasn't a cubby, it was a space, maybe 4 feet deep under the platform, and it was full of coats, small coats, children's wool pea coats, cardigans, sweaters. They weren't thrown in, they were arranged. Each one folded with this unnatural neatness, sleeves crossed over the front, placed in a perfect grid. Dozens of them. The styles: 1940s toggles, 1950s collars, 1960s cuts. My skin went cold. This wasn't a time capsule. This was a collection. Voice becomes quieter, more immediate. I reached in. My hand was trembling. I picked up the nearest coat, a small navy peacoat. As I lifted it, something clattered to the floor of the space, a small white milktooth. Then I saw the others, sprinkled like grisly confetti on the dark wood under all those folded clothes. I stumbled back, dropped the coat, called Cyril, my voice unsteady. You need to come back, and maybe call your cousin, the one on the council. While I waited, shivering, I did something impulsive. Dread makes you curious in the worst way. I checked the inside collar of the coat I'd dropped. Faint, embroidered letters, JH. I took pictures with my phone. Then I lifted another, a gray cardigan. Inside the label, in faded ink, for Maggie. Cyril arrived with his cousin, Brenda, a no-nonsense woman, their faces drained of all color. Brenda just said, "Oh, good Lord above." Cyril crossed himself, lips moving in silence. The RCMP came. The schoolhouse became a crime scene. I gave my statement over and over. The coats, the teeth, bagged and tagged. They brought in ground-penetrating radar for the schoolyard. That's when the first subplot emerged. The radar showed anomalies. Not under the yard. Under the schoolhouse foundation itself. Small, dense shadows in the earth. They lifted the floorboards at the rear of the building. They found bones, dog bones, small terriers, 5 of them, buried deep, arranged in a circle, skulls facing the center. Cyril watched from the police tape, sheet white. He told me later over strong tea. The dogs. When I was a boy, family's dogs would go missing. Never a trace. My grandfather said it was the little fellers taking them for company in the fog. We thought it was just a tale. The second subplot came from Brenda in the archives. She found a pattern. Old microfiche from the 40s to the 60s. Brief mentions. Local children, described as sickly or frail, who had passed suddenly at home. No doctors named, no funerals. The dates matched the older coats. Back then, Brenda said, her voice hollow, if a child was different or failing, some families saw it as a mercy or a shame to be hidden. The teacher here for 30 years, Mrs. Agnes Larkin, she was a pillar. She'd take in the poorly ones, they said, to tutor them, give the families respite. Agnes Larkin died in 1972, the year the school closed. A sudden decline. The police focused on her. They found her cottage. In the root cellar, behind jars of preserves, was a small ledger, not of names, dates and words. Pale, quiet, sweet-voiced, good listener. On the final page, a line in a shaking hand. They are not gone into the fog. They are the fog. I only kept them safe until they joined. No children's bodies were ever found. The official conclusion? Agnes Larkin, profound psychosis, macabre relic keeping, case closed, unsatisfying, ghoulish. I left Elliston as soon as I could. The restoration was abandoned. But the ending, it's not about solved mysteries, it's about a sound. Last week, back in my city apartment, a thick coastal fog rolled in. Rare for here. I was walking bare in the park. It was a void. And in the heart of that whiteness, I heard it. A distant collective murmur. Children's voices, not playing, whispering in unison. A hushed, endless recitation. Bear froze. A low growl in his throat. He wasn't looking at the trees. He was staring straight up, into the featureless gray sky. And I finally understood Agnes's note. She wasn't a murderer. She was a custodian. She collected the anchors, the coats, the teeth, the loyal dogs. The things that might tether a fading child to this world. She kept them. So the children themselves, the quiet ones, the good listeners, could fully dissolve into the thing that had always called them. The all-consuming whispering fog of the North Atlantic coast. I didn't just find a collection of coats. I found the lost and found for souls that belong to the mist. And sometimes, in the right weather, I think they're still listening for their names. You take a job for the quiet. That's what I told myself. My name's Kale. After a decade of high-stakes, grant-chasing oceanography, monitoring Lake Superior from a 40-foot trawler sounded like peace, a semi-retirement. My world shrank to wind, water readings, and the deep, cold silence of the greatest lake. My only real contact was a daily check-in with the Foundation office in Thunder Bay. The anomaly started as a blip. July 17th. I was lowering hydrophones into the deep hole off Isle Royale, where the bottom drops to over 400 meters. The sounds are usually a tapestry, freighter traffic, wave action, fish. That day, beneath it all, was a tone. A pure, sustained low-frequency note, like a giant's finger on the rim of a wet glass. It lasted 17 minutes, then vanished. I logged it as acoustic anomaly, likely geological. Tried to forget it. It came back the next day, and the next, each time longer. On the fourth day, I mentioned it to Sharon, the office manager, during check-in. Heard a weird one out here, like a pipe organ note. You getting anything on shore? Her reply crackled. Negative, Kale. All quiet. You sure it's not your gear singing? Positive. It's in the water. Then the tone evolved. It developed a second note, a third. It wasn't random. There was a pattern, a slow, deliberate progression. It felt less like geology and more like composition. Cold dread, deep as the lake's bottom layer, started in my gut. On July 22nd, the sky was an iron-gray plate. The water brushed lead. The tones had become a complex, mournful chorus. That's when I saw the first shadow. On the side-scan sonar, a massive tapered shape gliding beneath my keel at 150 meters. Too deep for a sturgeon, too large, moving against the current with impossible grace. My breath hitched. I grabbed the VHF. Sharon, you there? Go ahead, Kale. I've got a visual anomaly on the sonar, massive, and the acoustic event is active. It's linked. The shadow moves when the tones shift. I could hear the tremor in my own voice. Okay, stay calm. Could be a temperature inversion, a ghost image. Her voice was tight. It's not a ghost. I watched as a second shadow, then a third converged below. They weren't just swimming. They were positioning. Sharon, they're forming a pattern, a goddamn grid. I'm making for Tofino Harbor now. Do that. Keep the channel open. I throttled up. The trawler's engine sounded so frail against that aquatic symphony blaring from the speakers. The shadows kept pace, effortlessly. Then, the sound changed. The harmony dissolved into a cacophony of high-frequency pulses, sharp clicks, intelligently sequenced. It was language. It had to be. My dog, Finn, a terrier mix who never trusted the lake, started whining, scratching frantically at the cabin door. "They're surfacing," I yelled into the radio. Not 50 meters off the port side, the water bulged. A smooth, dome-shaped swell traveling alongside me without breaking. No skin, no fin, just rising water. "They're not biological, do you understand? They're made of water and sound." The radio spat back a burst of that same piercing, structured static. Then Sharon's voice, distorted. "Ael, Ignal, what is?" And then, clear as a bell, my own voice from yesterday. "It's in the water." Transmission died. True dead air. VHF, SSB, cell booster, all dark. Only sounds. The engine, fins scratching, and that deafening, beautiful, horrifying song from the deep. I looked at the sonar. The shadows were gone from beneath me. They were now directly ahead, forming a line between me and the shore. This is the first thing I never told the Coast Guard. In my panic, I dumped the entire acoustic dataset onto a standalone hard drive. Sonar logs, everything. Sealed it in a waterproof case. I opened the cabin door. Finn shot out like a bullet into the forward hold. I threw the case in after him, slammed the hatch. "Stay!" I screamed. It was the best shelter I could give him. I turned back to the wheel. The water ahead began to churn, not with waves, with standing, spiraling columns of froth. The sound wasn't in the speakers anymore. It was in the air, vibrating the fillings in my teeth. The last thing I remember is the light refracting through those spinning pillars, creating colors I have no name for, and a feeling of profound, impersonal attention. They found the Huron Sentinel 2 days later, drifting, engine idling, all systems functional. Finn was in the forward hold, alive, shivering beside the untouched case. I was gone. No mayday, no life jacket, no struggle. The official report suggested a psychological episode, isolation. Anomalous sounds attributed to faulty equipment and methane seeps. Case closed. Here's the second thing. The twist. Sharon mailed me the Foundation's internal memo months later. It cited a previously undocumented piezoelectrical phenomenon in the ancient bedrock. Glacial rebound, seismic stress, could generate complex frequencies. Their final line. While acoustically startling, the phenomenon poses no physical threat. Dr. Vance's disappearance remains a tragic coincidence. They were wrong. It does pose a threat, not of violence, of revelation. I didn't drown. The thing that lives in the deep cold of Superior, the thing made of pressure and memory and ancient stone, it doesn't eat flesh. It collects patterns. It heard my consistent presence, my measured tones of data and loneliness, and it incorporated me. I am a new motif in its endless, slow song. I am the ache of a missed check-in, the frantic rhythm of a fearful heart, the whisper of a man saying, "It's in the water." Sometimes, on still nights, if you're on a lonely shore of Gichigami, you might hear a new strain in the lake's mournful song. It sounds like a man realizing, too late, that he is not the listener. He is the melody being played. The lake never gives up its dead. It has a new use for them. You take a job for the quiet. That's what I told myself. My name's Jonas. After 2 tours overseas, a head full of noise that wouldn't drain, A seasonal watchman job at the old Prairie Sentinel grain elevator in Alberta seemed like a gift. Just keep vandals out. Report structural issues. My grandfather worked this line in the 70s. He called these elevators the Prairie's lonely teeth. I got that. The place sat a click outside a dying town called Harrow. A 70-foot wooden sentinel under an endless sky. My routine was simple. Show up at 8, walk the perimeter, then sit in the makeshift office in the old way station. Read. Listen to podcasts. The only sounds were the wind whining through the cracks and the wood groaning. The first odd thing was a smell. 2 weeks in, a dead-still October night, the scent of hot oats and diesel fuel, the ghost of a working elevator, just filled the lower floor. So strong it made my eyes water. Then, gone. I wrote it off, memory playing tricks. Then came the sounds. Not singing. A low, rhythmic whistling. A single, unwavering pitch, like steam escaping a kettle miles away. It seemed to come from the elevator's vertical leg, that great, hollow column where grain used to rush down. I'd climb to the cupola. Sound was below me. I'd descend to the pit. Sound was above me. Started at midnight, lasted till dawn. My supervisor, Dale, a pragmatic guy in Calgary, sighed over the phone. It's a 100-year-old wood tower, Jonas. It breathes. It talks. As long as it's not saying fire, you're good. But it didn't feel like talking. It felt like signaling. A deliberate, mournful signal. The second act started at the local diner. Old-timer named Vern saw my company jacket, nodded. "You're the fella at the Sentinel. Sleeping okay?" "Well enough," I said. He stirred his coffee, eyes distant. "My Uncle Lloyd was the agent there in the 60s. Good man. Got quiet toward the end. Said the elevator didn't just store grain. Said it stored waiting." He left it at that. The whistle got more persistent. Developed a second tone, a harmony. One night, I decided to trace it. In the pit, I noticed a section of wall looked wrong. The boards were newer. I got my crowbar. Behind it was a small space, a crude office, dusty desk, a ledger, and on the wall, pinned under yellowed tape, dozens of small square photos, black and white, portrait shots, men, a few women, all with that hollow-eyed, down-on-their-luck look. Transients, dates from 58 to 71, names scribbled, Charlie Red, Missouri Mike, the singer from Swift Current. Not official records, a collection. My grandfather's voice in my head. We'd get fellas off the rails. Lloyd would sometimes put 'em up for a night. The whistle started again, loud, vibrating the metal ladder. I fled to the office, heart pounding, called Dale. He was irritated. "Old hobo tags. Place is a museum. Don't tear more walls down." Next night, temperature dropped. The whistle was a chorus now, a discordant hum in my teeth. At 2 a.m., a new sound from below. The heavy metallic clunk, clunk, clunk of the grain distributor. The machine that routed grain to different bins. Impossible. Power was cut. Belts were dust. I went down, flashlight beam shaking. The big machine was still, but the air was thick with swirling chaff dust, and on the floor, fresh footprints, leading from that false wall to the elevator leg. Not mine. Smaller. Booted. The final piece. I went to the town archive, found Lloyd's obituary, 1972. Unexpected passing. Found a brief article from 65. Transient found deceased on CPR line near Harrow. No foul play. The man's photo matched one on the wall. I found 3 more clippings. Same vague fate. All near the elevator. All when the harvest was in full, deafening swing. When the machinery scream would drown out all other sounds. On my last night, I finally understood. The whistle wasn't a ghost. It was a vacuum, a call. The elevator was built to pull grain in, to hold it. Something in its geometry, in the resonance of that empty wooden tube, did the same with silence, with the people lost within it. Lloyd hadn't been collecting photos. He'd been recording offerings, letting them stay a night in the belly of the thing that had already tasted them. The climax wasn't something jumping out. It was the grate over the elevator pit sliding open by itself. A rusty shriek. The whistle became a deafening, hungry roar, pulling dust into the black abyss below. And from that blackness, I felt it. A consensus of attention, a patient, stored loneliness reaching up, not to harm me, to include me, to store me away in the silent, crowded dark where all the other waiting things were kept. I didn't run. I turned off my flashlight. I sat on the edge of the pit. The roar softened to a whistle, then to a sigh, as if satisfied I was no longer a stranger, but part of the inventory. I quit in the morning. Dale found a new watchman, but I bought the old way station from the company. I live here now, in the office. Every still night, I hear the whistle start up, fainter from here. Sometimes, I think I hear a third tone in the harmony, one that sounds like my grandfather's weary voice. The demolition plan's been indefinitely postponed. They say it's funding. I know the truth. You can't tear down a silo that's still full. My job has changed. I'm not a watchman. I'm the tender. I listen to the elevator sing its lonely gathering song, and I wait, wondering what name they'll pin to my picture on the wall inside, and who will hear me whistling in the dark years from now when the next watchman comes prying at the walls. You take a job for the peace and quiet. That's what I told myself. My name is Silas. After a decade of high-pressure mining geology up north, mapping the gentle erosion patterns of the Manitoba Badlands, felt like a vacation. I was chasing a specific sedimentary layer for a university dig. My gear was my religion. GPS, satellite messenger, detailed maps. Enough water for 3 days in my dusty Tacoma. First 2 days were textbook. Park, hike into the coulees and hoodoos, chip samples, log coordinates. The silence out there. It's not empty. It's a deep, mineral hum. On the third afternoon, my last day, I was packing up in a narrow coulee. Walls of cracked clay rose 20 feet on either side. As I zipped my pack, a rockfall clattered ahead, around a bend. Not unusual, but then, a distinct metallic ping, like a survey stake being hit. I called out, "Hello, DLC survey?" No answer, just the wind hissing over the rim. I rounded the bend. No one. But nestled in the shade of an overhang was this perfect, beautiful concretion. A Meraki boulder, but smaller. Soccer ball size. Spherical, with a crystalline surface that glittered with pyrite. Geologically, it was stunning, and impossible. Those form in marine sediments, not here. My professional curiosity, it overrode everything. Spent 5 minutes photographing it, taking notes. Didn't touch it. Light was fading. I decided to head back to the truck, camp, return at first light, took a final GPS pin, and I turned to leave. That's the last thing I remember with any clarity. The next thing I knew, I was waking up, in my own tent, at a different campsite. Sun was high, mouth tasted of dust and copper. I fumbled for my watch. 2:17 p.m. The date was 4 days later. A cold void opened in my chest. I scrambled out. My truck was there, my gear neatly stowed, a half-empty water bottle in my camp chair. I felt fine, rested. I grabbed my satellite messenger. No emergency signals sent, but the log showed a steady, green OK check-in, sent every 12 hours, like clockwork, for the past 4 days. messages I have no memory of sending. My field notebook was in the truck. The entries for the missing days were in my handwriting. They weren't notes. They were lists. Page after page of single words. Smooth, cold, pattern, wait, listen, breathe, and coordinates. Dozens of them, plotted in a tight spiraling cluster. My hands shook. I tried to call my contact, Dr. Aris. No service. I typed a distress message on the satellite device. Aris, something's wrong. I've lost 4 days. Before I could send it, a reply popped up. Instantly. It read, "Sample acquired. Awaiting retrieval. Do not deviate." That wasn't Aris. I threw everything in the truck and peeled out. Didn't stop shaking until I was under the fluorescent lights of the RCMP detachment in Lauder. Constable Higgins listened. He was kind, tired, ran my name. "No missing persons report," he said. "Your employer called yesterday, said you'd radioed in about extended field work." "I didn't," I said, my voice tight. He made the calls, spoke to Dr. Aris. She was confused. She'd gotten 2 text updates from my number saying I was extending for deeper analysis. Thought nothing of it. Higgins looked at me with that neutral professional concern, suggested dehydration, a dissociative episode. He drove me back to my original campsite. My truck was there, as I'd left it. No second campsite existed. He found my real field notes, ended 3 days prior. No other notebook. Medical check in Brandon. No trauma. No dehydration. Slightly elevated white blood cell count, like I'd fought a minor infection. Psych eval, clean. Official finding, transient global amnesia, stress and isolation. A weird, one-off thing, case closed. But here's what they missed. A week later, cleaning my gear, I found dirt in the cuffs of pants I hadn't worn, not Badlands clay, a fine gray, ashy silt. A friend in the soils lab was puzzled. "This is lacustrine, deep, cold, anoxic lakebed. Nothing like that within 500 kilometers of where you were." Then the dreams started. Not nightmares, procedural dreams. In them, I'm using my rock hammer on a vast, dark wall that isn't stone. It gives way like hard resin. I'm collecting pieces, placing them in sample bags. No fear, only purpose. I'd wake with my fingers aching. And then, the instincts began. Driving, I'd know the mineral composition of a roadside bluff. I'd wake up knowing the barometric pressure to the millibar. My sense of direction, unnervingly precise, like I'd downloaded a new operating system. The ending isn't about answers, it's about the delivery. A plain package arrived a month later, no return address. Inside, a geological sample box. In it, nestled in foam, a sliver of that gray, anoxic silt, and a single typewritten note on a scrap of fieldbook paper. Retrieval complete. Field data invaluable. The substrate thanks you. Continue your work. It was in my handwriting. I never found that spherical concretion. I don't look for it. I still work as a geologist. I'm the best in my firm now. Unerring. I don't lose days anymore. But sometimes, when I'm alone on a site, I'll feel a profound magnetic pull toward a particular formation, a subtle fold in the earth, and I'll know, not with my mind, but with a quiet, implanted certainty, that there's something there, waiting to be found, cataloged, and eventually retrieved. I didn't just lose 4 days in the Badlands. I was rented out, and part of the payment is, I now know exactly what my employers are looking for. You take assignments for the solitude. At least, that's what I told myself. My name's Ilara. Freelance. After a messy divorce and a dead-end newspaper job in Saskatoon, The open road was my therapy. My latest pitch was on the DEW line sites, those creepy Cold War radar stations scattered across the Arctic, like lonely metal mushrooms. I got special permission to photograph Site D18 on the coast of Somerset Island in Nunavut. Exteriors only, the government liaison said over a crackling satellite call. Interiors unstable, full of asbestos and 90 kinds of regret. I arrived by charter. The pilot, a grizzled Inuit man named Nuka, helped me unload. "You stay 2 nights, I come back. Don't go wandering in that tin can," he said, nodding at the hulking, domed structure. "Scout's honor," I said, holding up my camera. He gave me a look that was all squint, no smile. The first day, I shot the brutalist architecture against the endless tundra. The wind was a constant keening companion. That night, in my tent, I heard it. A low, rhythmic hum, like a massive generator under load, coming from the station. Impossible. Power was cut decades ago. I wrote it off as the wind. Next morning, I went looking for the source. Found a service hatch around back, partially buried. The lock was new, scratches around it, fresh. My journalist's itch, it overrode everything. I pried it open. Inside wasn't decay. Metal stairs, clean of dust, led down into a sterile, white-lit corridor. The hum was louder here, vibrated in my bones, smelled of ozone and cold metal. This wasn't abandoned. It was maintained. I followed the corridor to a sealed bulkhead door. A keypad glowed. On a whim, I typed the station's designation, D-1-8, a heavy clunk. The door hissed open. The room beyond stopped my heart. It wasn't a control room. It was a library. But instead of books, the walls were lined with clear plastic sleeves. Each one held a single, stark photograph of a person. Hundreds of them. Beneath each photo, a string of codes, coordinates, and a typed status. Archived. My breath fogged in the chilled air. I moved down the rows. The photos were clinical. A fisherman in Iceland, a woman in Winnipeg, a kid in Vancouver. Coordinates placed them all across the circumpolar north. On a central console, a monitor flickered to life. A map of the Arctic. Dozens of pulsing red dots. A log was open. The last entry, dated yesterday, read, "Subject 7781, archival complete. No dissonance detected." This wasn't a kidnapper's den. This was a filing cabinet, a terrifyingly official one. That's when I heard the voices. Calm, conversational, from a vent overhead. New batch from the laptop sector is integrating. Yield within parameters. Good. D18 archive is due for physical audit. Custodian notified? En route. ETA 6 hours. Custodian, audit. The words dripped with bureaucratic ice. I wasn't looking at crimes. I was looking at inventory. I started taking pictures. My hands shook so bad I fumbled the camera. I fled. Scrambled back up, out into the blinding tundra. Ran to my tent, my mind screaming. I hooked my camera to my satellite modem, tried to send the images to my editor. Connection failed. Retry. Failed. A new message popped up on my laptop. Plain text. Unknown server. Unauthorized data stream detected from non-custodial node. Cease transmission and await collection. Collection. I packed frantically, abandoning anything heavy. As I stuffed my sleeping bag, my fingers brushed something hard in the stuff sack. I pulled it out. A small gray metal disc, featureless, with a single blinking green LED. It hadn't been there before. It was a tracker. They'd been in my camp. The first subplot hit me then. Nuka, the pilot. His random check-in. His knowing look. He wasn't just a charter. He was a watchman. I was stranded. In sheer desperation, I tore a blank page from my notes, wrote down everything. Archived, collection. A handful of codes, sealed it in a Ziploc inside an empty fuel canister, hiked a kilometer to a rock formation and buried it, a message in a bottle. I returned to my tent to wait, paralyzed. 6 hours. At the 5-hour mark, the humming stopped. The silence was worse. Then, I saw it. On the horizon. A tracked Argo moving toward me with purpose. I didn't run. I stood outside my tent, camera in my hands. The Argo pulled up. 2 figures in unmarked white suits, reflective visors. Ilara Vance, one said. Voice genderless through a modulator. You have accessed a classified archival facility. Who are you archiving? My voice was thin in the wind. Potential, it replied. Patterns. Individuals exhibiting zero dissonance with projected future parameters. The world is changing. We ensure continuity by cataloging compatible elements. You're taking people. We are noting resources. You have forced an unscheduled audit. You will be processed. They didn't hurt me. They were calm. They took my camera, my laptop, my phone, scanned me with a handheld device. The lead figure studied the readout. Significant cognitive dissonance, elevated stress markers, not suitable for archival. A wave of bizarre relief washed over me. I was being rejected. Then what happens to me? You are a data point, an anomaly. The figure looked toward where I'd buried the canister, then back at me, its head tilted. You attempted to preserve data, a unique behavioral sub-pattern. They left me there, took all my gear, but left my tent, my sleeping bag, 3 days of food. Nuka returned on schedule, as if nothing happened, flew me back without a word. Final shift, quiet, institutional, haunting. No one believes me. My editor thinks I had a psychotic break. The authorities found nothing at D18, just an empty shell. All my photos, gone. But last week, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a single plastic sleeve. It held a photograph of me, taken from outside my apartment window in Saskatoon. Beneath it, a code. ANOM 7782, and the status, observed, behavioral sub-pattern, messenger, under review. They didn't archive me, they filed me under a new category. I'm not a missing person, I'm a footnote, and the audit is ongoing. You inherit a place hoping for quiet. That's the whole point. My name's Anya. I'm a freelance sound engineer from Vancouver. After a brutal year of city noise and entitled clients, inheriting my Uncle Carl's old A-frame cabin on Kitsam Lake sounded like salvation. A silent, pine-scented fixer-upper in the BC interior. Perfect. The place was rustic, built by Carl in the late 60s. My first week in June was all sweat and sawdust. I was re-insulating the crawl space when my knife snagged on something metallic behind a crossbeam. I pulled out a dusty, sealed ammunition box. No ammo inside. 7 reel-to-reel audio tapes, each labeled with a single typewritten initial and a year. 1975 to 1981. S 1975. L 1977. M 1978. Curiosity came first, not dread. I'm a sound person. Forgotten audio? That's a siren song. I had a vintage reel-to-reel deck in my van, a project piece. I cleaned the heads, threaded the tape labeled M 1978, and hit play. The voice that filled the cabin was young, female, trembling with forced calm. Test. October 12th, maybe 13th, 1978. My name is Mariella. If you're hearing this, I'm probably not around. I'm in the blue house on Cedar Street, the one with the rotten porch steps. He knows I know. He comes at night to watch. I see his cigarette glow from the tree line. I told Constable Davison. He said boys will be boys, that I should be flattered. A shaky breath. It's not attention, it's a checklist. He has a list. I heard him talking to the other one by the lake. They said, the harvest is thin this year. They weren't talking about fish. The tape ended with a soft click. The room felt 10 degrees colder. This wasn't a ghost story. It was a confession in a bottle. I played the next one. L. 1977. A different woman. Voice harder, edged with anger. They're not men, they're a roles. The watcher, the driver, the teacher. They move through this town like they own the air. My friend Sarah vanished last fall. They said she went to Calgary. Sarah was afraid of buses. I spent the day in a horror-struck trance. 7 voices, 7 women, detailing a pattern of systematic, normalized terror in a picturesque little town. They described vehicles, a green Ford pickup with a dented fender, locations, the old pump house. The final tape, K 1981, was just 3 minutes of slow, ragged breathing, then the sound of a door being softly shouldered open, and a whisper. Oh, it's you. Then nothing. My professional habits kicked in. I digitized the tapes. I ran spectral analysis. And on Mariella's tape, beneath her voice, my software revealed another audio layer, a man's voice. Faint. I isolated it, boosted the gain. It was Uncle Carl's voice, gravelly tone, unmistakable. He was speaking to someone. Not the one, too connected. The sisters in Vernon. Wait for the quiet one, always the quiet ones. My blood turned to ice. Carl, the kindly, solitary woodworker. The first subplot erupted. I drove to the library archives, searched for missing women, late 70s, early 80s. Found 2 brief buried articles. Local woman presumed moved to city. Dates aligned with the tapes. Closure was effortless. The second subplot was physical. I drove to Cedar Street, found the blue house. It was gray now, porch rebuilt. An elderly woman was gardening. I approached, heart in my throat, posed as a historian. Mentioned Mariella. The woman's friendly expression didn't change, but her eyes went flat. No Mariella here, dear. You've got the wrong street. Try over in Roseberry. She turned her back, clipping a rose with sharp, precise snips. As I walked away, I saw a curtain twitch next door, an older man's face, watching until I turned the corner. That night, back at the cabin, a note under my wiper. Neat, block letters. Carl's things belong in the past. Some sounds aren't meant to be remastered. Leave the tape hiss where it lies. I should have left, but the sound engineer in me was obsessed. The pattern was the horror. I went to the RCMP in the next town over. A young corporal listened, took Carl's name, ran it. His demeanor changed, from polite to pained. Ms. Voss, he said, leaning forward. Your Uncle Carl was a well-regarded man, served on the community board. These tapes, without corroboration, they're just anonymous voices. The Mariella you mentioned, no missing person file. He was giving me the official off-ramp, the sane exit. But I had the spectral analysis. I had Carl's voice on the tape. I blurted it out. The corporal's face went still. You analyzed the tapes? Not a question. Where are the originals now? Safe, I lied. They were in a deposit box in Nelson. He looked at me for a long moment. I'll need to listen to them, all of them, the originals. There was a new weight in his voice, not concern, procedural necessity. The ending isn't a showdown. I gave him the key. A week later, he called. The tapes contain no identifiable voices. just faint radio interference. Our audio analysis confirms. The box also contained a letter from your uncle, diagnosing himself with early-onset dementia, 1982. He likely made the tapes himself during periods of confusion. The originals I got back were not my originals. The audio was a muddy soup of static. Carl's layered voice was gone. The letter was typed on paper that felt all wrong. They weren't covering up a murder. They were maintaining an ecosystem. I finally understood the tape labeled The Harvest. The town wasn't hiding predators. It was a farm, and the quiet, unconnected women were the crop. Carl wasn't a killer. He was a husbandman, and I, by digging, had just proven I wasn't quiet or unconnected. I was a contaminant. I sold the cabin for a fraction of its value, drove away, and never looked back. But sometimes, when I'm editing dialogue on a quiet night, I'll hear a faint, persistent layer of tape hiss underneath the clean audio. A whispery, systemic static, no noise reduction plugin can erase. It's the sound of a town doing its maintenance. And on the worst nights, I swear I can hear a new voice, faint and terrified, being recorded underneath mine. The woman's friendly expression didn't change, but her eyes went flat. "No Mariella here, dear. You've got the wrong street. Try over in Roseberry." She turned her back, clipping a rose with sharp, precise snips. As I walked away, I saw a curtain twitch next door, an older man's face, watching until I turned the corner. That night, back at the cabin, a note under my wiper. Neat, block letters. "Carl's things belong in the past. Some sounds aren't meant to be remastered. Leave the tape hiss where it lies." I should have left, but the sound engineer in me was obsessed. The pattern was the horror. I went to the RCMP in the next town over. A young corporal listened, took Carl's name, ran it. His demeanor changed, from polite to pained. "Ms. Voss," he said, leaning forward, "your Uncle Carl was a well-regarded man, served on the community board. These tapes, without corroboration, they're just anonymous voices. The Mariella you mentioned, no missing person file." He was giving me the official off-ramp, the sane exit. But I had the spectral analysis. I had Carl's voice on the tape. I blurted it out. The corporal's face went still. "You analyzed the tapes?" Not a question. "Where are the originals now?" "Safe," I lied. "They were in a deposit box in Nelson." He looked at me for a long moment. "I'll need to listen to them. All of them. The originals." There was a new weight in his voice. Not concern. Procedural necessity. "The ending isn't a showdown." I gave him the key. A week later, he called. "The tapes contain no identifiable voices, just faint radio interference. Our audio analysis confirms. The box also contained a letter from your uncle, diagnosing himself with early-onset dementia, 1982. He likely made the tapes himself during periods of confusion. The originals I got back were not my originals. The audio was a muddy soup of static. Carl's layered voice was gone. The letter was typed on paper that felt all wrong. They weren't covering up a murder. They were maintaining an ecosystem. I finally understood the tape labeled The Harvest. The town wasn't hiding predators. It was a farm, and the quiet, unconnected women were the crop. Carl wasn't a killer. He was a husbandman, and I, by digging, had just proven I wasn't quiet or unconnected. I was a contaminant. I sold the cabin for a fraction of its value, drove away, and never looked back. But sometimes, when I'm editing dialogue on a quiet night, I'll hear a faint, persistent layer of tape hiss underneath the clean audio. A whispery, systemic static, no noise reduction plugin can erase. It's the sound of a town doing its maintenance. And on the worst nights, I swear I can hear a new voice, faint and terrified, being recorded underneath mine. You get used to the emptiness. My name's Reese. I'm a medical courier for the Northern Health Authority. I don't drive a rig. I drive an '06 Jeep Cherokee, shuttling blood, biopsies, sometimes transplant tissue between Whitehorse and the clinics up north. It's a lonely job. The cargo is always worth more than you are. You learn to love the rhythm, the dotted line, the brief human contact at each stop. My regular pullout is at mile 422 on the Alaska Highway. Just a gravel crescent, a dented garbage bin, and this breathtaking, lonely view of the Teslin River Valley. It was there one February morning, perched on the bin like an offering, that I saw the ledger. One of those heavy-duty, water-resistant logbooks, surveyor's kind. Thought someone forgot it. Brushed off a skiff of snow and opened it. It wasn't survey notes. The left-hand pages were meticulous entries, not license plates. Vehicle descriptions with medical codes. White F-150, BC plates, O-2 units. Red Dodge Caravan, Yukon, HEM-12 biopsy. Gray Silverado, Alberta, COR tissue, priority. Dates, times, mile markers, and on the right-hand page, opposite each entry, a single, stark stamp in red ink. Processed. A cold that had nothing to do with the air locked my joints. These were my runs. These were the codes I used. This was a log of medical shipments, but not official. The processed stamp wasn't a hospital check-in. It was placed at the mile marker after the pickup. Out here, in the middle of nowhere. My fingers trembled. I flipped to the last entry. Yesterday's date. Blue Jeep Cherokee, Yukon, Biohaz, level 3. That was me, yesterday. A sealed containment box for incineration. The stamp next to it was fresh, ink still raised. Processed, mile 422. This was my pullout. They'd logged me. Here. I threw the book on the passenger seat like it was burning and peeled out. Gravel spraying, heart hammering. Fumbled for the sat phone, the one with guaranteed coverage. Called my dispatcher, Janet. Janet, it's Reese. Something's wrong. I found a book at mile 422. It's logging our runs. With a processed stamp, my run from yesterday is in there. A pause. Faint static. A book? What kind of book? A logbook, like someone's tracking the shipments. It feels predatory. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Reese, you're stressed. It's probably a transport driver's personal log. They get superstitious, marking miles. You should have left it. It had codes in it, Janet. HEM-12, Biohaz. That's not superstition. That's inside knowledge. Another pause. Where is the book now? With me. Bring it in, to the Whitehorse Depot. Don't stop. Don't show anyone. Straight to me. The line went dead. The 2-hour drive to Whitehorse was a blur. Every oncoming headlight felt interrogating. Every truck in my rear view felt like it was pacing me. The ledger sat on the seat, a malevolent presence. The first subplot hit at a gas stop in Johnson's Crossing. Old-timer named Len saw my uniform. "Rough run?" he asked, wiping the windshield. "Seen anything weird? People at the pullouts?" He leaned on the pump, eyes narrowing. "Weird's a regular customer, but you're the blood runner, right?" I nodded. He spat on the gravel. "My cousin's a nurse in Atlin. Said they lost a whole shipment of O- last month. Vanished. Truck was found, cooler empty. No break-in." He looked at my Jeep. "You watch your six, kid. Some folks think certain materials have value beyond the hospital." The second subplot was at the depot. I didn't go to Janet. I went to Leo, a lab tech, showed him the book. "Leo, what does processed mean to you?" Non-official. He paled, scanned the entries. This is acquisition language. ONEG, 2 units isn't a shipment note. It's a yield note. Hem 12 biopsy. That's a specific genetic marker we flag. He looked up, grim. Reese, this reads like a harvest log. Someone's intercepting this material. Not for money. For the material itself. Janet found us. Her motherly concern was gone, replaced by a flat, administrative coldness. You didn't come to me, Reese. You compromised evidence. Give me the book. Who's harvesting the shipments, Janet? My voice shook. It's a security matter. There are interested parties, private research firms. They pay for samples that fall off the grid. It's ugly, but it's not supernatural. The book. Interested parties? I thought of Len's story, the empty cooler. Or something that doesn't pay at all. I handed it over. What else could I do? She took it, expressionless. Take a week off, paid. You've had a shock. I was put on leave. Security review. But Leo sent a secret email before I left town. Subject line, your last entry. Body text, they only log the successful acquisitions. The ending isn't about catching anyone. It's about understanding the ecosystem. I quit. I drive a city bus in Vancouver now. But sometimes, on my route, I'll see an unmarked van, or someone in scrubs loading a cooler into a private car, and I'll feel that old, cold dread. The highway wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was a vein, and I was a platelet, moving dutifully along it, unaware of the larger body that was quietly, methodically drawing what it needed from the flow. They weren't logging the missing. They were logging the collected. I got a week off not for my shock, but because I'd seen the ledger. I'd become aware of the harvest. And in systems like that, awareness is the only thing they ever really process. But sometimes, on my route, I'll see an unmarked van, or someone in scrubs loading a cooler into a private car, and I'll feel that old, cold dread. The highway wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was a vein, and I was a platelet, moving dutifully along it, unaware of the larger body that was quietly, methodically drawing what it needed from the flow. They weren't logging the missing. They were logging the collected. I got a week off not for my shock, but because I'd seen the ledger. I'd become aware of the harvest. And in systems like that, awareness is the only thing they ever really process. You move back for family. That's what you do. My name's Theo. After my biotech startup in Winnipeg cratered, took my savings, my relationship, the call about my grandfather's worsening dementia felt like a grim anchor. He was at Pine Grove Lodge out in Larkin. His mind was a satellite losing signal, drifting into static. He'd call me by my dad's name, ask about harvests we never had, just stare out at the flat prairie like he was waiting for a train. The night he went missing was a proper prairie screamer. A blizzard barreled in, wiping out the world. The lodge called at 9. Door alarm on the dementia wing triggered. Gramps, Arden, was gone. They found his slippers by the door. He'd walked out into -30 and a whiteout in his flannel pajamas. Search and rescue launched at first light. I drove the gridded roads until my fuel light came on, heart of frozen stone in my chest. They found him on the 3rd day. A farmer, checking his buried fence line 12 clicks north of town, saw a figure just standing in the middle of a field. Calm. It was Arden, alive. The paramedic who called me was baffled. He's fine, mild hypothermia, no frostbite, minimal dehydration. It's like he spent the night in a motel, not a ditch. When I saw him at the hospital, the first thing I noticed wasn't his condition. It was his eyes, the cloudiness, the confusion. Gone. They were sharp, blue, profoundly tired. He saw me and said, "Theodore, you've grown thin. City life?" His voice. It wasn't the reedy warble. It was the baritone from childhood fishing trips. He was cogent, remembered my startup's name, asked after my ex, Anna, by name. The doctors were thrilled, called it a miracle, a stress-induced lucidity, but it was more. The head nurse, Carol, pulled me aside. His chart, his arthritis, the advanced osteoarthritis in his hands. Look. She pointed. Gramps was holding a coffee cup, steady, no painful curl his fingers had had for a decade. Later, they found his cataracts had significantly receded. It wasn't just mental, it was physical. Partial, impossible rejuvenation. When they discharged him, I took him to my rental. Over whiskey, his request, another thing he hadn't touched in years, he talked. I got turned around in the snow, he said, staring into the glass. Then I saw the lights. Lights? Out on grid 5? There's nothing out there. Not a house, not a barn, just lights in the air, warm. They led me to a place, dry, quiet. He struggled for words. There were others there, resting. Others? From town? Not from town, he said, and his clarity was terrifying. From other times, a woman in a dress from the 50s, a boy in short pants. We just waited. Then the lights went out, and I was in the field. That was the first subplot. I'm a scientist, or was. I couldn't let it go. Went to the local archives, dug for stories of other blizzard disappearances. Found them. Brief, sad articles. Local child vanishes in storm, 1954. Farmer lost overnight, found unharmed but confused, 1971. The librarian, Mrs. Finch, saw my notes. Leaned in, voice low. You're looking into the courtesy, aren't you? The what? The courtesy lights. Old story. When the winter gets mean enough to kill, sometimes it offers a respite. Takes a few, lets them rest where time doesn't bite so hard, lets one come back to tell about it. She tapped the 1971 article. Old man Gerritsen. Came back from that. Died 2 weeks later in his sleep. Smiling, they said. The second subplot was in his belongings. Cleaning his room at the lodge, I found a sketch pad under his mattress. Gramps was no artist. But in this pad were architectural drawings, complex, beautiful, impossible blueprints for a structure with endless hallways and soft light. At the bottom of each page, in his now steady hand, specifications for a waiting room. He didn't want to see a doctor. They'll just see a problem to solve, Theo. This isn't a problem, it's a ceasefire. He'd sit for hours, memorizing the world. His appetite returned. He devoured books, but sometimes he'd stop, mid-sentence, and look north, a longing so deep it hurt to see. The twist came last week. The rejuvenation wasn't permanent. It was a parting gift. He had a final, massive stroke in his sleep. The coroner was flummoxed. It's like his vascular system, just unanimously retired. No major blockages. Peaceful, but biologically bizarre. At the funeral, Mrs. Finch handed me a folded paper. Found this. Thought you should have it. A photocopy of a homesteader's wife's journal, 1910. Lost little Peter in the Great White, prayed for a miracle. On the third day, he walked out of the field, clear as a bell. He said the nice lights showed him a warm palace where it was always summer. He lived a full, happy week. Told us everything was fine. Then he passed in the night, smiling. The doctor called it a failure of the heart. I call it a collected promise. He didn't come back to be healed. He came back to be a messenger. The blizzard, the courtesy, it doesn't steal people. It borrows them, spares them a frozen end, gives them a timeless waiting room. Then it gives one of them a ticket back, a week, a month of pristine clarity, to report that the other side of the storm isn't oblivion. It's calm. It's rest. Gramps came back with the blueprints for Heaven's antechamber in his head. His only mission was to assure us it was real before his time was up. I sold the rental. I'm moving back to the city. But sometimes now, when the wind picks up and the first flakes fall, I don't feel dread. I feel a strange, melancholic envy, and I find myself looking north, wondering if I'll ever see those lights, and if I'd be worthy of the message, or if I'd just want to stay in that quiet, warm waiting room forever.